Hello, hello. Sorry for the delay, guys. I had to organize a few things. Uh, though now we are here, and uh, hopefully we can start this off well with no further complications. Okay. Let me kind of do this. Yeah. Let me pull up the stream chat. Yeah, I'm going to have a couple more things to say about that, but uh, I actually wanted to finish the fifth chapter for this stream specifically, so we'd have more to narrate, but I couldn't, even after rushing to do so. Yeah, we'll be narrating a bit of the fifth chapter, and it will be properly published a bit after this stream. So that's what I mean by the title. But without further ado, let's start. Just need to check something real quick here. And yeah, we can start. Okay. It's not a good idea to rush things. I know, but sometimes I just can't help myself. Anyway, let's finally start in the palm of her hand. Chapter 1 Infection. I was waiting for the train when it happened. Being a transfer student, I obviously had no one to talk to on my first day. Though, since I didn't want to end up a loner yet again, I decided to at least try to make small talk with any people I saw at the station, wearing the same, or in the girl's case, a similar uniform to mine, though the fruitlessness of this endeavor quickly became more and more apparent the more I tried. Pretty much all of the school's friend groups were not only already formed, but closely knit as well. So any group of people I tried to talk to either subtly or outright told me to go away, and any person seemingly waiting for the train alone quickly lost what little interest they had in interacting with me as soon as their actual friends finally arrived. At some point, I just resigned myself to fate, waiting by myself quietly for the train to come, as I knew I would have to, once again, get used to doing. That is, until I saw her. A very short, beautiful blonde girl, waiting quietly for the train to arrive with a bored, longing, almost soulless expression on her face, quite similar to my own. That realization almost made me go talk to her, though I quickly gave up on that idea. After all, at this point I'd seen many people who gave me that sort of vibe, igniting the hope that I finally found a fellow loner I could connect with, only for their actual friends to arrive and squander that hope in just a couple of sentences. Even still, I just couldn't take my eyes off of her. Her long, flowing, princess like golden hair, her beautiful eyes with somehow naturally red irises, her short, thin, and adorable body contrasted beautifully by her tall, thick, athletic legs, almost entirely exposed by her unusually short skirt. Pretty much every part of her captivated me more than I think any other girl in my life had. Though at some point I, of course, managed to snap myself out of that trance. After all, with the way I'd been looking at her, I wouldn't have blamed the girl at all if she got creeped out and called in the guards to come deal with me. Fortunately, however, it seemed like she hadn't noticed what I was doing, or even the fact that I was there at all for that matter. So I decided to stop being a creep and simply go back to, once again, quietly wait by myself for the train. That is, until I felt someone tugging at my sleeve. I turned around only to jump back in shock as I saw her inches away from me, her sharp, penetrating gaze seeming to stare at my very soul. "Why were you looking at me?" she asked with a neutral, almost unreadable expression, sounding more like a living doll than a person. Her tone didn't seem accusatory. Heck, it barely sounded like it had any emotion at all, but still, just in case, I tried to play dumb. "Ah, sorry, you look like someone I know, so you're lying," she said, cleanly cutting me off before continuing. "I'm not mad at you, but if you, once again, refuse to answer me honestly, I'll make you regret it." Despite her small size, my whole body cried out in terror as she said that, every instinct in my mind pleading, imploring me to comply. And so I did, embarrassed beyond belief. I thought you looked beautiful. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." I thought she'd be mad at me, and so naturally prepared myself for the worst. However, "I see," she said with an unchanging expression as she turned her gaze back to the track in order to continue waiting for the train, only now a lot closer to me. As you can imagine, this put me incredibly on edge. Every once in a while, I would throw glances at her, waiting for what she actually had in mind for me, refusing to let myself be lured into a false sense of security. But nothing ever happened. She just continued to wait for the train like normal, leading me more and more to the impression that the actual reason she had not gone back to her original spot was purely out of convenience. And so, eventually, I relented and simply continued to calmly wait for the train alongside her, relieved at the quick and surprisingly clean end to that strange little interaction. Though, of course, things could never be so easy. As the train finally arrived, I rushed into it with a speed I could only summon in moments like these, all in order to secure the biggest prize of them all, a place to sit in such a packed train during such a long trip. However, as I secured my seat, happy as a little boy in a candy factory, I turned around only to see two piercing red eyes staring deeply into mine, less than a feet away from me. Her expression was just as empty as before, her body so still I could barely notice her breathing. Her hands were holding onto the sides of my seat, with her arms close to my head, blocking my movements from both sides, almost like she was trying to prevent me from escaping. I was frozen in fear, with a million questions popping up in my mind as I anxiously waited in a cold sweat for what she might do next. Though, as the train started to move and her body started to wobble uncomfortably, my fear quickly turned to awkwardness as I realized what was actually happening. The girl was so tiny, in fact, that it was pretty much impossible for her to reach the train's grab handle, which was the actual reason she was hanging on so tightly to the sides of my seat, the only solid thing within her range. And so, in a mixture of pity for her and embarrassed for being scared of nothing, I decided to give her my seat. "It's fine, you don't need to. Don't worry, I don't mind," I said, a bit satisfied, as pathetic as that was, to now be the one cutting her off. "Plus, you clearly need it more than me." "Thanks," she quickly responded as she took my seat, offering to hold my backpack in return, which I happily obliged. Though, even after not needing to do so anymore, she continued to stare at me, unblinking, with the same intensity as before. And so, now a lot more bothered and scared, I asked in frustration, "What do you want? Why are you looking at me like that? You were staring at me just like this before. Why is it a problem for me to do the same?" Oh, now I got what she was trying to do. "Look, I'm really sorry, okay? I swear I didn't mean to creep on you like that." "You misunderstand," she said with an unnervingly robotic cadence. "I was not bothered by your gaze. However, just like you looked at me with curiosity and admiration, I too now wish to look at you, captivated by those same feelings." It was incredibly awkward and roundabout, but it was still the first time a girl had given me such a nice comment, so I couldn't help but blush. "Thanks," I said, looking away in embarrassment. Though, instead of finishing the conversation with a polite, "You're welcome," as would be expected, she continued with a question of her own. "What's your name?" "Alex," I responded, still a bit shy. Though once again, instead of the usual, expected response, she looked at me with a slightly troubled expression, marking the first time I'd seen her manifest any, though subtle, sort of emotion. "Is something wrong? You don't look like an Alex. Frankly, I believe Christopher would be a much more fitting name for you." "Well, sorry to disappoint you, but..." I stopped, suddenly feeling incredibly nauseous, almost to the point of losing my grip on the train's handle. "Is something wrong, Christopher?" she asked, returning to her usual neutral expression. "Huh?" I protested, frustrated. "Lady, I don't know what kind of prank you're trying to pull, but it's not funny." "But I'm not trying to pull a prank on you." "Well, why? I'm sorry. Well, why are you calling me Christopher then?" "Because you just told me that this was your name." "Are you actually trying to piss me off? Because I'll be taking my seat back if you don't cut this out already," I said, already at the end of my patience. "Are you sure you're okay, Christopher? It's not normal to be this forgetful at our age." "Okay, that's it. But as I moved to pick up my backpack from her lap, I noticed something strange. She's right, wasn't she? Looking back on it, I did distinctly remember telling her my name was Christopher. But why did I do that? My name's Alex, isn't it? But was it really? Now that I think about it, my mom did call me Christopher as she ordered me to help her out with the dishes today, didn't she? In fact, that's what she had always called me. So why was the name Alex so vivid in my mind? Why did I feel weird being called Christopher if that was the name I had all throughout my life? Incredibly confused, I decided to take out my wallet in order to clear this up once and for all. And, as I did, my memories were immediately confirmed by the name Christopher Oliver Monroe, written clear as day on my identity. So, sorry, I don't know what came over me. "It's okay. You haven't slept well, have you?" "How do you know that?" "You just look tired, is all." Which, combined with how much I seem to have startled with you, would explain your irritability, which in turn would explain your irrational behavior. "Yeah, I guess you're right," I said, just trying to end such an embarrassing conversation as quickly as I could. Though even then, throughout the whole train ride, no matter how hard I tried, I simply could not shake off the feeling that there was something deeply wrong about what had just occurred. Okay, and that was the first chapter. Um, does anyone have some thoughts to share, some opinions about like how this went, about the story, etc.? I'm going to wait for like a minute, and then if not, we will be moving on to the second chapter. Uh, Afisha says you're doing great with the narration. Thanks. And since no one else commented anything, I'll just be moving on to the uh, next chapter already. Chapter 2, Asymptomatic, Part 1. Even after we got off the train, Usagi continued to, sorry, closely follow me all the way to school. "Are you sure you want to keep walking that closely to me? Am I being a bother?" "No, it's just that people are probably going to start spreading rumors about us if you do, you know." "Like what? Like that we're dating or something?" "I see," she said, continuing to follow me just as closely, making me unsure what to think. As, es- as expected, even after I introduced myself to the class, every single person there continued to be just as apathetic towards me as before. Even during lunch, not a single person so much as approached my seat. No one except, "Are you going to the cafeteria?" "Nah, brought my own lunch," I said as I took out a plastic container with spaghetti that my mom had prepared from my backpack. So you do that as well? Interesting, she said, taking out a similar recipient from her own backpack. Well, I said, a bit taken aback. Want to eat together then? She didn't answer, simply sitting on a desk close to mine and, without hesitation, starting to eat with a fork she took out of another pocket in her backpack. Unsure how to respond to that, I simply started doing the same. So, Usagi, I said, desperately trying to think of anything to break the awkward mood. Yes? Are you an active person? Why do you ask? Not to sound like a creep, but you just look so strong, so I was wondering. I regularly practice gymnastic exercises at home. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thanks for sharing. That actually answered a few more questions than I think she even realized. I'm not sure how, but I do distinctly remember learning at some point that competitive gymnasts, especially those that started training from a very young age, often end up very short, even as adults as a result. Though her having reached that point just from training at home was really impressive. It also explained her chest, or more accurately, the lack thereof. While I don't mind, I'd still advise you not to stare at my breast so intently, as many would consider that both indecent and inappropriate. Oh, sorry. What about you? Are you an active person? No, quite the opposite actually. What do you do in your free time? Well, I stopped, utterly embarrassed. Yes? Do you promise not to laugh? Yes. I like photography. Being the pessimist I am, I still prepared myself to endure her mockery despite the promise, as I was quite used to people not taking those seriously, though instead that seemed to heavily pique her interest. Can I see some of them? She asked, her unblinking, penetrating gaze once more focusing exclusively on me. Sure, though since right now I. Let me do that again, sorry. Sure, though since right now I can only show you the ones I took with my phone, they won't exactly have the best quality. That's okay. I'm only trying to gauge your skill, not the quality of your equipment. Well, in that case, I said, centralizing her in my phone's camera, strike a cute pose. Why? Well, the ones I take with my phone are mostly pretty casual, so instead I want to show you what I can really do when I get serious. I said, realizing only moments later just how utterly cringe that sounded. Very well then, she responded, as she made double peace signs with her hands, seemingly, thankfully, unbothered by my little levels of cringe. And so I began making that the best photo I possibly could, adjusting the focus, centralizing her as best as I could, testing out various angles and distances to see which ones looked best, adjusting the lighting and filters, etc. And thankfully, she complied diligently with all of my requests, changing her pose, adjusting her position, and overall just enduring without complaint my asinine perfectionism. Until, there, I declared as I finally took the Dan photo, running enthusiastically to show her the result. She inspected it for a while, her expression still completely unreadable through the whole process, making me incredibly anxious. Incredible, she said succinctly as she handed me back my phone. You mean it? Yes, you truly are an amazing photographer. Again, as much as I knew how pathetic that was, I couldn't help but feel super happy about the compliment. In fact, if it's not too much trouble, would you mind coming over to my house today? Huh? I said in mild disbelief. I'm sorry, what did you say? I asked if you'd mind coming over to my house today. Lady, we just met each other today. Isn't it a bit early for this kind of thing? It's fine if you don't want to, but personally, no, I don't see any issues with my proposition. You know I'm a guy, right? I'm aware. Okay, I don't think you get what I mean, so let's put it this way. You're about to invite a guy you barely know to a place where you and him will be either alone together or with very few people around, and you see no issue with any part of that idea. In response, she sighed in frustration as she got up from her chair, while saying, I could attempt to explain my reasoning to you, however, I believe a demonstration would be more efficient, she said, gesturing me to get up from my chair as well. Okay, very well, she said, assuming a typical boxing stance and footwork. Now try to defend against my next attack. As a handicap, I'll only attack you once, and will only do so when you're fully prepared. Does that sound good? While she was clearly way more experienced in martial arts than I was, that is, she had any sort of formal training at all, I'm not gonna lie, hearing such a small girl feel so confident in her ability to defeat me felt very insulting. Very well, I said, assuming a much stiffer and more amateurish fighting stance. Just don't complain when. But before I could even finish my sentence, I felt a powerful kick hit the side of my head, instantly knocking me on the ground. It wasn't even a blink and you miss it kind of thing. My eyes were glued to her the entire time, and I still couldn't even see her kick coming. One instant, I was looking at her, the next, I was knocked prone on the ground. Sorry, she said, extending her hand to help me up. I try not to hurt you too much, but I guess I didn't hold back enough. That was her holding back? I thought, utterly baffled. So tell me, do you still think I should be afraid of anything happening? Guess not, I said, utterly defeated as I accepted her kind gesture. Or at least I tried to. But before my hand could even reach hers, she instead used that same unnatural speed to grab me by the collar and pull me close, as she stared directly into my eyes with that same piercing, threatening gaze she had on the train station. Just so we're clear, however, you don't plan on doing anything weird, do you? Nope, you're officially talking to the most innocent boy alive. Glad you're here, she said, as she properly helped me up. Okay, that was chapter 2, and let's see if anyone commented anything. Now that I think about it, does the fact that people in school treat Alex so coldly have to do with Usagi in some way? Like his memory? Mm, would that be a spoil? No, no, no. That wouldn't be a spoiler. Uh, no, I just thought of that as like because a lot of people have at least told me similar experiences, that they got into a new school and tried to make friends and uh, couldn't because everyone pretty much knew each other, especially in like small cities and with schools that like range from elementary to high school or even college. Like that kind of experience is a bit more common than like I think a lot of people realize in those types of schools. So it's less of a supernatural thing, is more of me trying to portray that. But with that done, we'll be moving on to the next chapter. Just need to check something here, and wow, that's a bit interesting. But anyway, let's continue. Chapter 2, Asymptomatic, Part 2. A bit after we started, again, sorry. A bit after we started walking to her house, I noticed something peculiar. Usagi was smiling. It was a faint, subtle expression, but it was still a clear sign of emotion, the strongest I had so far seen from her, in fact. You're still that smug about kicking my ass? I jabbed, playfully. It's not that, it's just, she said, seeming a bit hesitant to continue. My mom always said that walking home with a boy you like felt pleasant, warm, safe, and comforting, and I never truly understood what she meant up until today. I don't know why, I said, still feeling pretty defeated. It's not like I can defend you any better than you can defend yourself. Heck, I might even get in the way in the worst of cases. It's more the feeling of it, I guess, she said, as she let out a small giggle. Besides, even if that's true, walking around with you makes it much less likely that any dangerous situations will even occur in the first place, don't you think? To be fair, I could see her point. As strong as Usagi was, at the end of the day she still looked like a very small and dainty young girl. So while she could probably handle any pervert that attempted to take advantage of her, having them not even try due to me being there probably felt much better. However, as I thought that, a certain part of what she said caught my attention. Though a boy you liked, huh? I highlighted with a smug smile of my own. Not to be arrogant or anything, but are you, like, actually flirting with me or something? Because it sure as hell sounds like you are. Yes, is it working? Well, not when you're this direct about it, you know. In response, Usagi once again sighed in frustration as she said, "Why do these things have to be so complicated?" I know, I know, I said, patting her back in an attempt to comfort her. Mon, I brought home a friend, okay? I'm sorry, it's a bit hard to portray because I can portray that well in text form, but in narration, how should I portray that some time has passed from one scene to the other? I guess I'll just say, after a while, Mon, I brought home a friend, okay? Usagi yelled as we entered her house. As she did, I heard footsteps coming from what appeared to be the kitchen, and as her mother came into view, a chill ran down my spine. She looked exactly like Usagi, and not in the sense that she simply looked familiar like a family member should. No, everything about her, from her skin tone and hairstyle to her hair and eye color, and even her body type and facial structure, were all carbon copies of her daughter, to the point that, were it not for a slight difference in height, I'd been much more likely to guess that they were twins, or maybe even clones instead of mother and daughter. Heck, even her demeanor was the same, with her cadence and expression being just as robotic as Usagi's, with the only difference being that her mother's voice was ever so slightly deeper. I see. So will you be studying together? No, he's a photographer, so I brought him here to register my techniques. It's the exercise room free today? Yes. Your father will be coming home late, so you can use it to your heart's content. Very well, Usagi said, now turning to face me. I'll be going to my room to change into my leotard, so please wait here a bit while I do, okay? Yeah, sure, I said, still taken aback by the scene. The way they spoke to each other felt so hollow, it disturbed me to my core. Forget mother and daughter, they didn't even feel like people speaking to each other. While Usagi's emotions were always subtle when talking to me, they seemed absolutely non existent while doing the same with her mom. Like the two of them were AI sharing information instead of humans talking with one another. The whole thing just felt wrong beyond belief. Though before I had too much time to think about that, I heard her mom turn to address me. Come, she said, gesturing for me to follow her. I finished making dinner, so you can enjoy a bit of my food while you wait for her to change. Oh, no thanks. I appreciate the hospitality, but you really don't need to trouble yourself. Please, I insist, she said, approaching me a bit more, staring directly into my eyes with that same piercing gaze her daughter had. After all, it's pretty late, so you must be hungry, especially after walking all the way here from school, no? She did have a point there, so especially since I knew refusing again would just make things awkward, I decided to relent. I'm sorry, I saw something on chat and it made me laugh. Let's continue. That said, if I had to describe her food, bland would definitely be the most fitting word for it. It wasn't bad, far from it, but it also didn't have anything special to it, feeling way more like a dish made in a production line instead of a homemade one. Still, I did make sure to properly express my gratitude. After all, she had to go out of her way to make more of it for her and her daughter after feeding an unexpected guest like me, so that was the least I could do. Thanks for the meal, I said, finally realizing I still hadn't asked for her name. Rita. Yes, thanks, Miss Rita. You're welcome, she said, her expression still completely unchanging. I really hope I'm not being too much of a bother. A friend of Usagi's is a friend of the family, so you may consider yourself welcome in this house. Thanks, I said, breathing a sigh of relief. To be honest, I was a bit worried that you guys might be wary of for as long as you neither try to hurt nor defile my daughter, she said, closing the considerable distance we had between each other in an instant, right before my eyes, looking at me with those same red, piercing, threatening eyes I gotten very used to seeing at this point. Are we understood? Yes, man. Very well then, she said, as something else seemed to catch her attention. It looks like my daughter finished changing, so I suggest you go meet her right away. On one hand, that had probably been one of, if not the scariest experience of my life. On the other, it made me a bit relieved to see that, despite her cold demeanor, Rita definitely loved her daughter, just as much as any mother should. And then a bit of time after that. So, how do I look? Usagi asked as I entered their exercise room, doing a little twirl in order to show off her whole outfit. As expected, she was wearing a standard, long sleeved, black gymnastic leotard, whose best descriptor was once again the word bland. It had no decorations, glitter, or any fun patterns, and, though tight, its jet black coloration, combined with its incredibly low leg cut, also made the whole thing disappointingly modest. Even so, well, it was still a leotard, so it, of course, still left her beautiful legs entirely exposed, making it pretty hard for a boy like me to figure out any way to look at her without feeling like a creep. It looks great on you, I said in the most awkward voice you can possibly imagine. Thanks, she said nonchalantly, with her usual neutral expression I had grown so accustomed to seeing at that point, before turning around and making her way to one of the gymnastic bars set up in the room. Do keep in mind that during my exercises, I'll obviously not be able to stay still for long or change my pose freely, so you have a very small window of opportunity to both identify a good moment and then register it as best as you can. Are you able to do that? With a hand behind my back, I exclaimed arrogantly as I backed away and centered my phone's camera on her. Okay, ready when you are. Oh, and one more thing, she said, looking back at me with a slightly stern expression. No creep shots. If I notice too much of a focus on my butt or legs in any of your photos, I'm kicking you out of my house. Got it? I wasn't planning to, but thanks for the warning, I guess. Just making sure, Usagi said as she jumped and grabbed the bar in order to start her performance. It's always best to be safe, as they say. And what a performance, I must say. I'd said before that she'd need to train at a professional level for it to start affecting her body to the extent it seemed to have. But, in all honesty, even the title of professional athlete paled in comparison to what she was able to do. Her performance so mesmerizing that it almost made me completely forget what I was even there to do in the first place. Her body moved with an almost unnatural grace, switching seamlessly between one complex pose, bar trick, or jump to another with neither wasted movement nor even the slightest hesitation, again and again and again for what appeared like minutes on end. And most impressively of all, as she finished her performance by landing graciously on the ground after a triple somersault. Uh, I'm sorry, I just saw something that gave me pause. Red Fox, man, what the fuck? I really hope you're kidding with that. Sorry for the interruption. Let's continue. Where was I? I'm really sorry. That caught me really off guard. Okay, let's start that over. And most impressively of all, as she finished her performance by landing graciously on the ground after a triple somersault, she didn't look. Well, thank God. Fucking. Why did you. I'm sorry. Let's move on. And, most impressively of all, as she finished her performance by landing graciously on the ground after a triple somersault, she didn't look even the slightest bit tired, breathing normally and without a drop of sweat on her as she approached me and gestured to let her see the pictures I took, which I happily obliged. Once again, however, her expression was completely unreadable as she flipped through the photos, consequently making me, once again, incredibly anxious. Though unnecessarily so, it seemed, as, also just like last time, incredible, Usagi said as she continued to flip through the photos with an unchanging expression. This came out exactly like I wanted them to. Glad to hear it, I said, relieved. After that, I registered her number on my list of contacts and sent her the photos, waving goodbye as I left her house after a bit of post-exercise small talk. And after a while, he arrives at his house. Though, as I arrived home after the fact and headed to the bathroom to take a shower, the realization of the sheer absurdity I'd experienced throughout the entire day finally hit me full force. What Usagi was able to do wasn't simply impressive, it was downright superhuman. She moved faster than my eyes could follow multiple times and flawlessly performed a gymnastics routine that would leave most professionals exhausted for minutes on end, all without breaking a sweat. The weirdest part, though, was that I didn't even think to question any of these things while they were happening. I just accepted all of it as if it was natural, only realizing the sheer insanity of Usagi's feats way after I got home, like I'd woken up from a dream. That, combined with how aggressively she'd been flirting with me all day, really suggested that, whatever her intentions for me were, they were most certainly not in my best interest. And so, I decided that, for my own sake, I absolutely needed to start avoiding her as much as possible. Okay, Oh, hey Fisher. It's still interesting to already see the next puzzle. Like it's so mind blowing in a good way. Well, thanks. Let me just check something again, and then let's see if anyone else commented anything. I guess no. Oh well. Let's continue. Chapter 3, Early Signs, Part 1. To that end, I did the last thing any student wanted to do, waking up early, as my plan was to go to school by bike instead of taking the train. It'd be a pretty long and tiring journey, but entirely possible with the extra time I had. It wasn't a perfect solution, of course, as I'd still have to interact with her, even if only a little, when I arrived at school, but it at least bought me a bit of time to hopefully come up with a better one on the way. Preferably one that didn't involve me getting yelled at by my mom for skipping school. And then a bit after that, as exhausting as it was, though, biking to school was also surprisingly pleasant. Feeling the wind and the warm, gentle rays of the morning sun on my skin as I biked freely, all by my lonesome, felt a lot better than the boring wait I had to endure at the station, all to catch a ride on an absolutely packed, cramped, and sometimes even smelly train for minutes on end, making me actually start considering just biking to school every day, both to avoid the train and Usagi. Though, just as I thought that while waiting for a traffic light to turn green, I felt a weird pressure on my belly and back, looking down with dread that quickly turned to horror as I saw two small, feminine arms wrapped around my waist and heard a familiar, monotone voice say, "Good morning, Christopher." For a moment I couldn't even think, much less speak, completely baffled by the sheer absurdity that such an insignificant amount of time was somehow able to contain. But, after exerting what felt like a Herculean effort, I finally managed to stammer out, "Why didn't you catch the train?" Sometimes I like to walk to school instead. And before you ask, meeting you on the way was pure coincidence. Yeah, as if, I thought, enraged that she really thought, even for a second, that I somehow buy such an absurd explanation. Even if it was true, the chances of her deciding to do so on the very same day I did, all while leaving early enough that she'd meet me at this exact point, at this exact time, and from a precise position where I wouldn't notice her approaching, all despite me using a significantly faster method of transport, were so astronomically small that even calling it the mother of all coincidences would be one hell of an understatement. And yet, as outraged as I was, what could I even do, realistically? Push her out my bike? Try to dupe her and escape somehow? Convince the authorities that she was a strange weirdo disrespecting my personal space? No, given all the ludicrous stuff I'd seen her do up until this point, none of these solutions had the slightest chance of working. And so I resigned myself to fate, settling for simply trying to end whatever conversation she tried to start as quickly as I could, all in the hope that this would make her lose interest in me. Why didn't you catch the train though? Just didn't feel like it, I guess. Do you like biking? I thought you said you weren't the active type. Just a bit. Is something wrong? You generally don't give such short answers. Not really. She paused a bit after that, gasping slightly, as if she'd suddenly come to a realization, before continuing. Are you scared of me, Christopher? Yes, of course I was. But saying that would just give her the opportunity to ask more and more pointless questions until I gave up. And lying, well, given how emphatically she had threatened me the last time I did, it simply didn't seem like a good idea, to say the least. So instead, I decided to put that whole little charade again, sorry. So instead, I decided to put an end to that whole little charade by confronting her head on. What are you, Usagi? I don't understand the question. Don't try to act dumb. I know what I saw. And what did you see, exactly? You, Usagi, doing things no human should be able to. For example, seriously? Is she really trying to play dumb even after this point? I thought, completely livid. No matter. Does she want examples? Well, then let's see how much longer she can keep playing dumb after I actually present them. That gymnastic routine you performed yesterday was really impressive, especially for an amateur, wouldn't you say? I said as I started to bike again after the light turned green, now with Usagi as a passenger. What's even more impressive, though, was that you were able to do the whole thing without even breaking a sweat. Really? Because I, at least, remember barely being able to walk afterwards. I was about to confront her on such an obvious lie when, once again, I was affected by that strange nausea I also felt at the train. Thankfully, it lasted only a moment, but as I tried to recall yesterday's events to call her out, a clear image of her breathing and sweating heavily, with her hands on her knees, barely able to stand after the performance, formed in my mind. But that couldn't be true. If I remember seeing that so vividly, then why did I even ask her that, with such conviction too, in the first place? Why did that idea even pop in my head at all? No matter. After all, there's still something very weird about this story, I thought. Sure, but still, don't you think it's a bit. Sure, but still, don't you think it's a bit unusual for someone our age, practicing by themselves at home, to even be able to perform at such a level? Furthermore, why didn't I question this, even for a second while I was at your house? Don't you think that's a bit weird? The only actually weird thing here is how awful your memory is, she countered, her monotone somehow making the whole roast even more insulting. Because you did ask me that right after I finished my routine, in fact. And I already explained that, though a hobby, gymnastic is still something I'm very passionate about, to the point of applying myself, even from a very young age, to improve as much as possible, even convincing my parents to hire various teachers throughout the years, all to perfect all my moves as much as I could. I tried to confront her, but once again, as I tried to recall yesterday's events, my memory only showed me the exact scene Usagi described, without even a hint of what may have inspired my misconception in the first place. That specific memory seemed weird though. Unlike the previous one, this scene appeared cloudy, muddled, and lacking in detail, more resembling a distant memory instead of a recollection of a recent event. Still, that was far from the only strange thing I could use to confront her. But what about your mother? I get that you're family, but it's still strange that you look that similar to her, wouldn't you agree? I asked, right as I stopped at another red light. It's a hereditary genetic abnormality, she said while showing me a photo on her phone, one that looked straight out of a horror movie. It was a group photo of all the women in her family, which, as you can probably imagine, were all identical to each other. The only major differences I could spot were in the younger girls in the picture, as the toddlers, of course, had significantly shorter hair than the women and girls, and the girls, logically, varied wildly in terms of height based on their ages. The adult woman, though, all looked like the exact same person, with their different outfits and poses being the only way to tell that you weren't simply looking at a well edited picture of a singular woman copied and pasted several times. The most unsettling of the photo's details, however, were the woman's expressions. Though their poses varied, each and every one of them looked straight at the camera with that same neutral, cold, unfeeling, and piercing gaze I'd grown way too accustomed to at that point. It's unique to my family and causes every female in it to be born as a perfect genetic copy of her mother, as well as to age very slowly, though the exact mechanism is still the subject of ongoing study, she said while sliding past a couple of other photos, stopping at one which depicted her in a doctor's office, as he drew a bit of blood from her arm. I can also show my medical records if you need further proof. No, that won't be necessary, I said, feeling completely defeated. In fact, I believed you already questioned me about that as well, haven't you? So it's somewhat annoying to have to explain all this again. This time, however, my recollection wasn't just muddled, it was straight up incomplete. No, I remember asking, yeah, but I also remember you ignoring the question and gesturing for me to show you the pictures I took. I see. I apologize for my rudeness then, she said with an ever so slightly troubled tone. I guess you're not the only one with memory issues. That's not all, though, I said, still refusing to relent. I also noticed how quickly you apparently became so fond of me. I get love at first sight, but flirting so directly after knowing me for just a day sounds pretty suspicious, don't you think? You can be really mean when you want to, you know? She retorted in a somewhat pained tone, as if on the verge of tears, while she squeezed her arms more tightly around me. Most other people try to avoid me as much as possible, so is it really that weird to be excited when someone finally looks at me with admiration and interest in their eyes, instead of the usual discomfort and awkwardness? Is it really that weird to be happy when a cute boy finally treats me with kindness instead of the usual disdain? Needless to say, hearing that made me feel extremely guilty. I knew exactly how awful it felt to be isolated from everyone, as well as how nice it was when someone's finally friendly to you. So the fact that I, of all people, had the gall to find her suspicious just for that made me feel like the world's biggest jerk. Sorry, I take that back. I stammered, trying fruitlessly to somehow fix the situation. I'm sorry. Am I really that bothersome? She asked as she squeezed me even tighter, while practically burying her face in my back. I can try to be less forward if you prefer. Just please don't avoid me like everyone else does. No, I'm sorry for being so suspicious of you. I really don't know what came over me. She didn't say anything in response for quite a while, making me feel extremely anxious until finally, it's fine, just, she said in a sad, though finally calm tone as she loosened her embrace. Promise me you won't say such mean things again. I promise, I said, deeply regretful. Okay, all the comments I got here were like just jokes or Aphicious saying that they're really excited. So, um, well, thank you very much. And I'll just check something again. And yeah, with that out of the way, I'll start the narration of the newest chapter. Though, unfortunately, since I couldn't finish it in time, instead of a full chapter narration, it will be more of a half chapter instead. And so we'll kind of start from the half of chapter 5 to chapter 10. Calm down. To chapter 10 in the next stream, instead of like splitting it up like I originally planned. But anyway, without further ado, let's get on with it. Of course, after such a fumble of a confrontation, a very awkward mood settled between us, one I desperately wanted to break. And so I began racking my brain in search of a topic, any topic that could at least break that agonizing silence. You know, I've been meaning to ask you something for a while now. What is it? She asked softly and in a worried tone as she, once again, tightened her embrace around me. It's nothing serious, I swear, I stammered, desperately trying to calm her down, which thankfully seemed to work. It's just, well, this is going to sound a bit weird, but is your father Japanese? She took a while to answer, clearly a bit confused or maybe even baffled, which made sense given how out of pocket that question was. No? Why? Do I look Japanese? Not really, but that's kind of the point. Your mother's name isn't Japanese, so if not even your father's from that country, then why is your name Japanese? Oh, well, she said, clearly a bit hesitant or maybe even outright embarrassed, before continuing. Let's just say that my mom is a big fan of anime. Oh, okay, I get it now. Yeah, so please don't point it out anymore, okay? she pleaded, now very clearly embarrassed as she once again buried her face in my back. Sure, sorry for that. It's fine, she said, not only in a much calmer but also happier tone. I could tell you were just trying to make things normal between us again. Well, in that case, do you also like anime? Why, do you wanna watch one with me? She said, clearly catching on to my intentions once again. Yeah, well, if you don't mind, that is. Can it be at my house? Sure, and you can choose it as well. It's settled then, she said as she gently rested her head on my back, clearly satisfied. And so, after classes ended, we once again made our way to Usagi's house together. Mom, I brought Christopher home again, okay? She yelled as soon as we entered. All right, but your father will be here in little over an hour, Rita yelled back, clearly too focused on whatever she was doing to answer us face to face. So if you want to use the exercise room again, you have to be quick about it. No, it's fine. He just came here to watch anime with me. The moment those words left Usagi's mouth, Rita instantly exited the kitchen and approached us by the entrance, with a look of pure excitement in her face. I was, understandably so, I think, a bit taken aback by the scene, as the fact that anime, of all things, had inspired the strongest display of emotion I'd seen either of them express was hilariously absurd as it was off putting. Can I? No. Usagi immediately shot her down. I see, she said, disappointed, as she went back to the kitchen. Well, you kids have fun then. After that incident, we sat on the living room's couch to watch the show on the house's main TV. The specific anime Usagi chose was a rom-com shoujo about an alien girl trying to make a human boy she has a crush on fall in love with her, all while dealing with the various hijinks and awkward situations resulting from her desperate attempts to hide her alien nature from him, due to her belief that he'd not like her if he knew. The plot, jokes, music, character design, and pretty much every other element you can think of were all incredibly generic, predictable, and uninspired. It was the kind of anime I'd normally drop even before watching half of a single episode out of sheer boredom. Still, given the genuine smile and excited reaction she had while watching it, I could tell that it was special to Usagi. And, while I couldn't even begin to understand why for the life of me, frankly, just seeing her so happy already made the whole experience worthwhile for me. After a while, however, just as Rita had alluded to before, Usagi's father arrived from work, announcing his presence with the most exhausted, low, and raspy voice I'd ever heard. Just a moment, okay? My throat is a bit dry. Okay. Of course, 9 to 5 jobs were naturally draining, as my own dad could probably attest to, but I never heard him, or anyone for that matter, sound quite that tired. Though, not even in my wildest imagination would I have been able to come even close to predicting what I'd see when I turned around. The man was skeletal, his dry, thin, and flaky skin clinging tightly to his bones, with barely any muscle or fat between them. His eye bags were worse than any I'd ever seen, though his eyes themselves were in a much better condition, staring straight ahead with a glazed over and soulless look to them, like the man was barely aware of what was going on or where he even was. His movements were all slow, shaky, and methodical to an almost mechanical degree, like the man was struggling to even stand. Overall, his physical condition was so horrendous that it made me legitimately concerned for his safety, as it really appeared like it would only take one wrong step to put that man in the grave. What horrified me even more than that, though, was how nonchalant Usagi seemed about the whole thing. Welcome, Dad, she said, turning back slightly to face him, without even pausing the show. Thank you, Usa. But as the man turned around to face her, his gaze fell instead upon me, and just as I feared the again, and just as I feared, the moment it did, the slightest bit of life seemed to return to his eyes, as he questioned, in the most threatening voice he could muster, "Who's that boy, Usagi?" "Oh, he's my boyfriend," she said, matter of factly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I invited him over today for a little casual date." "Eh? Usagi, what the?" Before I could ruin everything, though, Usagi looked straight at me, gesturing with her hands, obscured from her father's view by the couch, for me to roll with it. "Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you, Sir Alex," he responded in a dismissive, angry tone as he turned his gaze back to her. "Now, little lady, why didn't you—" Before he could continue, however, he was stopped completely in his tracks by what appeared to be one nasty headache, before continuing, now once more without an ounce of life in either his expression or voice. "Whatever, just," he said while clutching his head. "Don't get her pregnant and we won't have any troubles, okay?" Yes, sir." "Good, glad you understand," he said as he went to the kitchen, still clutching his head on the whole way there. And yeah, that will be it for today. So, what did you guys think of the story overall? Do you have anything you like to say? Any suggestions, criticisms, etc.? I'm going to stay here for like a couple more minutes to like talk to you guys before we end stream. Before that, let me see some of the reactions here. Which Usagi did she name her daughter after? Probably like a Sailor Moon. Father debut. Oh, I see. Wait. So yeah, I'm going to wait for a few more comments. And now let's see. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Just don't get pregnant. Yeah, it's the main concern of every dad, I guess. um but yeah, for now this will be it. This was a new kind of string I tried to do. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to be that popular. Like we literally only have one person watching right now, but it was still fun anyway. So I'll try to do more of these in the future. And for now, I think this will be it, since no one has anything else to say. Thank you all for watching, and I do hope to see you all again next time. I liked it. Thank you very much.